Perfect. So can you hear me okay as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, everything fine. Okay. So we have 41 participants. I would wait for another 2 minutes, by the way, just to let people join.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
And Ingrid and Sylvia, I just wanted to say that I'm happy to help you with monitoring the chat for questions. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
So I'll keep an eye as well. Don't worry while you're talking.
Good.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so it's 3 minutes past, so I think we can slowly but surely get started with today's patient engagement open forum session. And I would like to welcome all the participants to the session on the Roadmap Initiative to Good Lay Summary Practices. Just to open the discussion and to open the session, I'd like to say a word about the Patient Engagement Open Forum, which is, as you know, a collaborative initiative between Paradigm, PFMD, Patient Focused Medicines Development, and UPATI. And essentially the aim of the session is to really turn patient engagement, or the aim of the series of webinars and sessions is to turn patient engagement into the reality, to show all the great collaborative work that has been going on in this field. And we really try to take a holistic perspective on patient engagement, and we're really trying to engage and inspire discussion and collaboration about important topics related to patient engagement. And I'm really happy to see so many people join today, and I'm really happy to welcome Ingrid Klingman from EFGCP and Sylvia Garcia from FPIA, who are going to be presenting and leading this interactive session. I'd like to encourage everyone to join in the conversation. As mentioned previously, you can ask your questions in the chat box, and we'll be keeping an eye on that one. And also, please take part in the survey that we are going to have during the session, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. And with that, I would hand over to Ingrid and Sylvia.
Yeah, good afternoon, dear participants. I'm really very happy that we have received that invitation to present our joint project here to you. After we have spent now nearly 2 years on developing this, I think we are now at a stage where we can present results. And I'm very happy that we can do that jointly, because it was from the beginning a very clear joint initiative based on a workshop 2015 already in that EFGCP and FPR organized together about the need and the content and the approaches to lay summary practice or to lay summaries, because that was a requirement in the clinical trial regulation that was released in 2014, supposed to come into force in 2016, but as you all know, we still don't have that because the underlying CTIS database is not yet ready. Nevertheless, we are preparing for being ready for the clinical trial regulation, and therefore it was also important to become much more clear and concrete about how this new request for lay summaries can be enabled and how to maximize the effect, the intention of this new element in the clinical trial regulation. And the intention of this initiative was really to make the public much more aware of what happens in clinical research, and to make sure that the information about clinical research, the transparency about the results of clinical trials is reaching the public. Therefore, we had then this first workshop. We defined in that workshop what should be key elements of the content of such a lay summary. In fact, what happened then in the next 2 years was that the European Commission prepared recommendations, partly also based on the discussions that we had on this workshop. We had a second workshop then in 2017 where we discussed this newly released recommendations. And as a conclusion from that event, there was a clear joint understanding that it's not sufficient to know only exactly what should be in the lay summary, but also how to create the whole infrastructure for lay summary planning, preparation, and dissemination, and especially which role patients should play in this whole process as the ultimate recipient of the document, and therefore very strongly interested in making sure that we maximize the effect of these documents that have to be prepared now by sponsors. And as a result, we created then the roadmap initiative to clinical research in Europe between FPR partners in Europe and USA, and patients and academia. And Sylvia is now going to present to you where we stand with that initiative, and I will continue then with the latest developments, so to say. So Sylvia, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So let me see if you see the presentation. Not yet. Do you see?
Yeah, we can see your
screen?
Yeah.
Okay, also before starting, some words on my side. So it has been a pleasure to work for now almost 2 years in this initiative with the EFGCP and the partners. So we had a common goal, and it is reporting and interpretation of study results is very important for all stakeholders, and in order to increase the transparency and to address and for the benefit of the public at large, and specifically with a special effort to the patients participating in these trials. The aim of this presentation today, and thanks a lot for joining, is that you get familiar with our recommendations on best practices for implementation and dissemination of lay summaries that we will build up. So we didn't start from scratch. We build it up on what Ingrid said. There has been different guidance, and specifically the one that has been published by Commission, so the clinical trial expert group, that, as you probably are aware, members of this group are one representative from the National Competent Authority and Ethics Committee from each member state, and we have been working on the last year close and in collaboration and discussion with them, and we have been very happy on the latest discussions with them and seeing their interest, and maybe we get the final state of adopting in the end this recommendation document as an official document for goal end of the year, finalization and endorsement by the Commission of that, taking in consideration all the comments from the public consultation that we ran over the summer from patients, academy, industry, and Commission as well that they evaluate. So, and as last before starting, and as Ingrid say, we want to do this with the patients, not only for the patients. So the aim is to suggest patient engagement involvement in all the steps, so into this framework, so from planning to development to translation and dissemination of lay summaries, so that this is something useful for patients and public at large. So to start with, I would like to remind you so that this initiative is a multi-stakeholder initiative with over 60 participating organizations. And sorry, I'm moving the, can I do this smaller? That started in March 2019. And this is a global initiative involving US partners, because research is global, and building experience, as I say, we didn't start from scratch, from existing guidance and specifically from what Commission published in 2017. So here you can see some of the members part of this initiative, some of them. We would like to start with the definition of lay summary, and I may say here that there is not an agreed global definition per se. So what you can read it here is our working definition of lay summary. So summary of results from a clinical trial in lay language as required by the EU Clinical Trial Regulation 536/2014 and by global transparency commitments of pharmaceutical and academic sponsors. I think Ingrid, you mentioned there will become an obligation when the clinical trial regulation will be implemented by early 2022. So the publication of this summary of clinical trial results in lay languages via the clinical trial information system that will be the European database at that moment. According to the clinical trial regulation, this should be the content of a lay summary. So as a minimum, it should include clinical trial identification, name and contact details of the sponsor, general information about the clinical trial, population of subjects, so that it means the trial participants, investigational medicinal product use, the description of adverse reactions and their frequency, results of the clinical trial, indication if follow clinical trials are foreseen, and indication of where additional information could be found. Just as a repetition, we didn't start from scratch, so because this is an important topic for stakeholders, and as I say, reporting and ensuring interpretation of the clinical trial results, it's a matter and beneficial for the public at large and the participants of the clinical trials. So transparency and the right of citizens to access clinical study and toxicological reports submitted to the European Medicines Agency, EMA, is a guidance principle which was endorsed already in January 2020 by the European Court of Justice. Additionally, presenting the results of all clinical trials in a consistent and reliable manner and in a way that it's easy to understand, so in plain language, to the public and in particular to the patient, has been recognized by all global stakeholders involved in patient engagement. And there is this existing EUPATI guidance for patient involvement in industry-led medicines research and development. the summaries of clinical trial results for layperson that I guess we circulated as a pre-read, and that's the recommendations that the clinical trial expert group from the Commission published. This describes, or the focus is very much into the content of the lay summary. That's one of the reasons why we decided in co-partnership with the FHGCP and others, so to build on that and really made the best practices on recommendations for implementation and dissemination of lay summaries. There are also other existing guidance in the US side. So to accelerate, drafted in January 2017, the layperson summaries of clinical trials and implementation guide. And as you probably know, industry associations are part of this Transacelerate consortia at the US side. And then on the side of academia, the multi-regional clinical trial center at Harvard University, including academic institutions, published in July 2016, the Return of Results Guidance document. The target audience for lay summaries, for you to understand, as we say, this is our recommendations is for the public at large, but specifically is for participants, people who took part in the clinical trial, people from patient organizations who communicate with patients with the disease areas, specifically from the clinical trial involved, individual patients who receive or seek treatment, caregivers, including family members or other close relatives, and investors, funders, or payers, and HTA professionals. As we say, the lay summaries is intended for commercial and non-commercial, so academic trial sponsors. And a lot has been done. So since 2014, it's mandatory for sponsors to publish synopsis of the clinical trial results in the European database, so in the EUDRAC. And this will become an obligation, so the publication of lay summaries, so in lay language, at the time the clinical trial regulation will be implemented and with the recovered timelines. That means 12 months since last patient last visit for adult clinical trials, and 6 months since last patient last visit for pediatrics. The legal requirements for lay summaries are defined in the clinical trial regulation, and this is for interventional trials with a medicinal products, but our recommendations on the good lay summary practice recommends to develop and disseminate beyond that. So all clinical research projects are on the scope, so observational studies. And there is no agreed process for the dissemination so far of the lay summaries beyond the clinical trial information system. And we leave sponsors to choose in a voluntary basis how best they think or they believe the dissemination beyond the clinical trial information system can be done. Our recommendation document contains the definitions of direct and indirect dissemination, and we list in there a list to a sponsors. We have to keep in consideration that this is for the general. Yeah.
You've been breaking up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm breaking. Okay. So
You've been breaking up. Just to go back to your previous sentence, because it was breaking up and we couldn't hear you.
So what I say is that there is no agreed process for the dissemination of lay summaries beyond the clinical trial information system, and that our recommendation document includes the options of direct and indirect dissemination, and we included in there a list of risk and benefits for each of the options to be chosen. But as I all the other options. So when developing as sponsors the Lay Summaries, for the public audience, so we should not assume that the target audience have knowledge, previous knowledge of the trial, or are familiar with the medical terminology, or they have knowledge on clinical research in general. We should keep this in consideration to keep the document as short as possible, and also avoiding simply copying text from the technical summary. We should keep in consideration that explaining technical terms in a simple language may increase the number of words and the translations. What the CTEC recommendations document includes is that it's not enough translating the Lay Summaries to English, so they have the recommendation to translate the Lay Summaries to at least the languages where the clinical trial is running in Europe. And it makes sense and is consistent. Our recommendation document also includes with the informed consent translation. So as a conclusion, we should focus on an ambiguous factual information, so avoiding simply copying text from technical summary, as I say, and keep it as short as possible for being understandable and comprehensive for the general public. It is very important and crucial to ensure that there is no promotional content in these Lay Summaries, and we should include health literacy and figures that are understandable. We always say to keep or to include health literacy for a kid of or a child of 12 years old. We also should consider involving patients and patient representatives and advocates or members of the public in this development and review of the summary. So in order to assess that the information provided in there is comprehensive enough, and with a caveat that it will might be not feasible for some studies. And I think now, Ingrid, I will turn over to you so that you can explain in detail our ELSCP recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much, Sylvia. So if you go out, then I share my screen.
Yeah.
And maybe, Sylvia, if you want to just reflect on two questions from the audience. So one of the questions is, are the translations, I guess the lay summaries, EMA requirements too? And if you could comment briefly on what we mean by direct and indirect dissemination.
Perhaps I can mention here that this will be part of my presentation afterwards.
Oh, perfect.
So, I will go into this into more details. And if you want to talk about the second question, Sylvia.
Yeah. So what we have included in our recommendation document as a direct communication is communication, sharing the information with the patients directly via the investigator or a third party. So that might be the case, for example, when they don't have access to internet. So because the information of as I say, the synopsis of clinical trial study results since 2014 now is posted in EUDRAC, and in future with implementation of the clinical trial regulation will be via CTIS, and it might be that they don't have access to that. So the investigator should be printing it, or a third party via the patient organization, they could provide it to him or to her. As indirect communication, we refer to, when we are using the sponsor website or a platform, external vendor posting the information. So not you database validated platform, it's more a private website where the public at large can have access. And currently we are under discussions on this indirect communication with Commission and partners to see how to how to proceed. Ingrid, would you like to comment on that?
No, I think this is absolutely fine, and I'm going to mention that as well a bit later when we talk about the overall infrastructure. But this was, I think, a very important introduction to that topic. And I will also come to the question of translation, because the other question was whether translation is mandatory, and I will comment on that as well. So I think I probably start then the presentation with going back to your last slide, and there your last sentence, your last bullet, because as you can see in that current recommendations, currently available recommendations from the CTEC, which was created in fact in 2016 and 2017, it was said that it would be recommendable to have patients involved, but this won't be feasible for some studies, but where it is a possibility, it may enhance the final version. And when this was presented to our audience in the workshop in 2017, where we had about 50% of the audience were patients, it was heavily criticized that this was much too vague and too general, and that this would not ensure that the future process of lay summary development and dissemination will really reliably include patients in that whole process and infrastructure. So it was a very important prerequisite for our roadmap initiative to figure out what can be done, should be done to consistently make sure that patients are involved and will be involved in this process as part of the very strongly improving discussions about and abilities about patient engagement and the role that patients have and are playing in this concept, in this overall development of new treatments. So we said, okay, we need a new document that describes more, not just the content of the guideline of the lay summary, but really the overall infrastructure. But we were thinking then how best to integrate the currently available recommendations. And so we made the existing recommendations integral part of this good lay summary practice document that we have developed now. So what we did there is really based on and referring to everything that is said there. While we were in these discussions, there was ongoingly the question what to do about pediatric lay summaries or pediatric trial lay summaries, because that is a specific situation, first because it's not only for the adults, but it's also something that we have to figure out how we inform the children who participated in the trial. But it turned out that there is very, very limited experience with pediatric study lay summaries. And so we could only integrate here, let's say, first recommendations on how to approach it in principle, but here in that area, we will still have to learn a lot. We also wanted to make sure that the scope is very clear. There are other type of plain language summaries for example, for journal publications or conference abstracts, and we clearly define that this is out of scope. We are focusing here on lay summaries to present the results from clinical trials. And we were also, because our members in the roadmap initiative came from Europe and USA, it was a permanent discussion on whether that should be a document just for Europe or globally. And while we have in Europe the legal requirement that data or the lay summary has to go into the CTIS system, we wanted to, and we want to make sure that outside of Europe, but also within Europe, there is a possibility to disseminate the lay summaries more broadly, or to give patients more easily access to that information than just the CTIS. So we have phrased here that it's at the discretion of the sponsor in what way, whether and in what way he would want to go with a dissemination beyond the legal requirement of the CTIS system. Now, the document is built according to this structure. We have divided it after an introduction into a planning phase, a development phase, a translation phase, and the dissemination phase of the lay summary development. We defined the input. So, for example, in the planning, it's the scope of the lay summary project during protocol development to secure budgets, especially in the academic environment. It's at that stage, even before the study is approved, that a budget for lay summaries should be included now in future calls and in future budgets of proposals for calls, that the resources and timelines are foreseen upfront and in a very clearly prepared way, because as Silvia explained, the timelines between last patient out and the delivery of the clinical study report and this lay summary is extremely short. It is 1 year, and in pediatric studies, even 6 months. So we have to make sure that we are really well prepared. Then we have the development phase, so preparing really the lay summary and who is going to be involved here. And there we spend quite a lot of efforts on the skills that are required to prepare those type of documents. Then we have a section on translation. And to answer the question here, translation is not a mandatory requirement in the legislation. It does not say that translations need to be made or which translations need to be made, but the existing recommendations have said something about this, and we also felt that we need to make a statement here or proposal how that should be handled in a good lay summary practice environment. And then the whole area of dissemination. So that is the structure how we approach this whole thing. And in parallel to that, we defined the role of patients in planning, development, translation, and dissemination. I will explain that a bit in more detail than in the following slides. Now, when we talk about patients, we ran, of course, also very quickly into the discussion, what is a patient? And as you are hopefully aware, in the EUPATI has created these definitions that we have in all our guidance documents there. And there we distinguish between individual patients and their carers, but then also patient advocates. These are patients or people who have the insight and the experience in supporting a larger populations of patients living with a specific disease. They may or may not be affiliated with an organization. And in contrast to this, we have the patient organization representatives. These are people who may or may not be affected by the disease, but are working for a patient organization and are therefore representing that community. And then we have that category, this new category of patient experts. And these are people, patients who, in addition to disease-specific expertise, have also the technical knowledge in R&D and or regulatory affairs, either through specific training in the EUPATI expert course or through many years of working already in that environment and having gained that type of knowledge to be able to fully understand the process and give advice also on an expert level. So these are patient experts, and we have made an effort to explain which type of patients we think are most suitable for certain activities in the lay summary infrastructure process. So let's go to the planning phase. So the patients are able, and we think it's most probably the level of patient experts that can consult here regarding the planning, the identification and prioritization of patient relevant outcomes and endpoints. We recommend in patient engagement, as you all know, that patients are really taking part in when we plan a clinical trial at that stage and recommend here on prioritization of outcomes and endpoints. And in this discussion, we also think that it is important to take into consideration already the very end, which is the lay summary of the results, whether these outcomes and endpoints can also be well explained and can be justified to this audience. We also think that it's important to integrate the perspectives of recently diagnosed persons in this process with little knowledge about the disease, and persons who have lived with the disease for a long time and have experienced perhaps even with different stages of the disease. So it may be that it's a good advice to include people with different level of or different type of expertise at that stage. Also, consider obtaining insights of people who indirectly live with the disease, like the carers. That might also bring in different areas of indications very important insights. And patient experts, on the other hand, can help determine which trial information afterwards is meaningful for the patient. So at the end, the results of the clinical trial will be presented in a clinical study report. This is a very long document with a lot of information. And those who prepare the lay summary will have to make a selection of information that is going to be presented. And there are clear decisions that the primary endpoint, the primary objective and endpoint of the research has under all circumstances, of course, to be presented, but there is ongoing discussion at the moment, which we also still need to solve in our initiative, whether secondary objectives and endpoints should be also presented in the lay summary, because that will make the document much longer and much more complex. So there are pros and cons, but patient experts can certainly help here with that discussion. And then if there is patient involvement during trial design, then that can also help to inform content decision for the trial design, but also for the patient information sheet and the informed consent form, because that is a continuation. We have patient input into those documents that are made for the patient during the trial. That is in lay language, and we should create a consistency then with a lay summary at the very end. In the development phase, it is about co-authoring and consultation regarding the terminology used by patients, the format of the lay summary and the presentation style of the lay summary. And we think that this can be done by patient experts, but also by patient advocates or patient organizational representatives. We need a large cohort of people who can do that. Because there are so many clinical trials ongoing and so many have to be reported and will have to be reported. So we need enough capacity to be able to do that. And all these levels of experiences that I describe here can fulfill that. Patient experts know about, of course, the patient community, their needs and preferences. So they may be able to identify content and terminology which are potentially unclear, misleading, or unacceptable, and help develop alternative language that are recognized within that patient community. And it might also be necessary to have not only one, but several patient experts to involve them into the initial review of the lay summary to make sure that everything is captured that can be captured here, but always keeping in mind the time pressure. Now, once the lay summary is in principle reviewed in this way, then it still needs to be made sure that there is a user testing for the readability and understandability of people who have no clue, neither about the study nor about the medicine's development process or clinical trials process. So just to check whether the information that has been provided in this lay summary is understandable and especially attractive also for patients and the public at large, because we are fully aware that if the document is not attractive and easy to read, people will not go through it, but flip through it and put it aside, but then we will not achieve what we want, that they really engage in understanding and learning about that research that has been performed. So we really recommend that patient and public representatives who participate in that user testing and readability testing do not have prior insights or knowledge of the trial, and also that they represent different educational backgrounds, also literature experience, age, gender, regardless whether these are patients or representatives of the public at large. That doesn't matter, but it should be people with different backgrounds to make sure that we capture every important aspect here. Now, in this document that we have produced in this GLSB recommendations, we have very nice tables which help the producers, but also the reviewers on how things should be done. So we have such a table on health literacy, what can be done to ensure that the document is really well understandable with practical examples and elaboration. We have the same for numeracy, how to present numbers. And then we have a table about how to avoid non-promotion, to ensure non-promotional, how to avoid promotional language. And there we have a table with do's and don'ts that can also be very helpful in preparation for the review of a lay summary. Coming to the translation phase, as I mentioned already, there is no legal obligation to go into translation, but we had in our discussions with CTEC about this new document here, there it was clearly expressed that the Commission would expect that there is always an English version that goes into CTIS, because practically everything is in English there, even if the study is only running in one country and even perhaps the protocol is in local language, but we always have this need to reach out to many other people through the CTIS system, and therefore it should be an English version. But that is not yet completely ultimately decided. So there should be clearly the lay summary in the language of the country where the study took place. But if it's happening, if the study has happened in different countries, then we recommend that there is a translation into all the languages of the people from these different countries that are spoken by people in these different countries. We have also the patient information sheet in these different languages. So in line with that, we should also have the lay summary translated to those different languages. And what we also recommend is then not to only do the translation, but also to have a user testing in these countries by mother tongue speakers to make sure that the notions and the perhaps culturally differently expressed pictures or ways of explanation can be caught, and so that we are really suitable for everybody in their local language in the different countries with our lay summaries. A hot topic is, in fact, the dissemination, because legally, as I said, and Sylvia as well, legally it's only the CTIS where we have to disseminate the lay summary, but we are very much aware that even in Europe and definitely beyond Europe, very few people are aware of the CTIS and the ability to find lay summaries there. So if we want to achieve the outcome that we want, the spirit, that we fulfill the spirit of producing lay summaries, we need to make sure that we disseminate the information as broadly as possible. But the question is how to do that without appearing as being promotional. And that is the big danger that everybody is seeing and is fearing. And so we have to find ways how to avoid that. So first of all, we recommend that patients are involved in the dissemination plan and make proposals how this type of research should be best disseminated to their community. And that should be done by patient experts or patient organization representatives. These have very good local understanding about the differences and the sensitivities also about dissemination. Therefore, it is really a very strong recommendation to include patients into these discussions and planning as well. And we have to accept that the methods may be different in the different countries, and that should be accepted and considered as a plus, because we can maximize here the efforts. And when we have people who have local insights, so also in the other countries involved where in that trial, we can help to avoid ineffective and inappropriate dissemination efforts in other countries than the core country as well. Sylvia explained already the difference between indirect and direct dissemination. So indirect dissemination is really by entering or providing the lay summaries on open publicly available websites that can be websites of the pharma company, that can be websites of the patient organizations, or other publicly available websites that can be evaluated and figured out how to do that. And directed dissemination really means directly to the trial participants and investigators through a targeted, restricted delivery system. But they are not mutually exclusive. It can also be done in both ways. Now, the problem is, so there are, for the direct dissemination, or also the indirect, there are technical and non-technical ways. So we explain that as well in the guideline. But every dissemination strategy has risks. And so we, after long discussions, we came to the conclusion that in our GLSP, we should not say, this is the way you should do it, but that we present all possibilities and explain the benefits and the risks. And with that, we can leave it up to the sponsor to be fully aware what benefits and risks are of the different dissemination strategies, and consciously together with patients, it can be then selected which specific plan, dissemination plan, is then going to be rolled out for this trial. The risks are, of course, from a technical point of view already, that patients have forgotten about the fact that they will, when they finish the trial 2, 3, 4 years later, when the overall study is finished, get access to that information. They may have lost a URL that had been given to them, for example, in the patient information sheet. The investigators, if we include them, there is a big chance that they have no more contact with the patients, and that they cannot reliably provide the lay summaries to their patients, etc. So there are quite a number of issues and problems, and therefore we also proposed then some risk mitigation strategies here. So the best fit should be based on a proactive assessment of aspects such as logistics, timing, technology, costs, privacy, risks of miscommunication, and vulnerability of the trial population. And we have certainly different possibilities for commercial sponsors and academic sponsors in how far and in what way the dissemination can take place. But our GLSP is, so to say, giving the frame to where we want to be when things are optimally handled. And this should be the stimulus to make all participants in this process be ambitious and strive for getting closer and closer to such an optimal stage that we are proposing here. So we have produced this document in summer. We have launched a public consultation in July that went until 14 September. We have received very good comments. Quite a number of stakeholders have bundled comments, and so we have altogether more than this year as results, but there is quite a large group of people who have read through it and commented on it. The general comments were, and that was of course something that we always struggle with, that the document is still too long, detailed and prescriptive, but how to balance here giving enough information or recommendations versus as few as possible. There were comments that the level of patient engagement that we promote here is not realistic, especially in academic trials. On the other hand, a patient group was concerned about how the patient engagement recommendations would be enforced. How can we make sure that it's going to happen? And the requirements should be highlighted, whether they are mandatory because of the regulation or good practice or nice to have. And we are certainly taking that also into consideration and try to streamline the document in that aspect. There were different opinions about the pediatric lay summaries, whether they should get a specific chapter or whether they should get mentioned all through the document more intensively. So we are working on that as well. And specifically, academia made very expressed very strongly that investigator-initiated trials, so IITs, would never be able to fulfill the requirements for skilled resources, translations, etc., and dissemination, and that involvement of patient and even different patients within available resources and budget will not be possible. There was also concern about the different skills and the fact that we presented that we need different patient types to present different skills. But it can also be that some people have several skills in one person combined, so it must not be a separate person for everything. User testing, the suitability or feasibility was also taken into under criticism. And but what was also a very important comment and stressed very clearly was that there is need for comprehensive training in good lay summary practice. And we realized that also in UPATI, it's really necessary not only to train patients, but also industry and academia in how to engage patients, and especially in our case then how to engage patients in the lay summary process. Then there was a specific request from not-for-profit organizations that clinical trials in early phase, which can present the results later than 12 months, they have 30 months, so phase 1 studies, that also the lay summary should then be delayed. Or the question was, do we need lay summaries for healthy volunteer studies at all? And there was also a proposal to include in our recommendations medical device trials. We have very generally done this at the moment, but the European Commission is very much against that because there are already certain type of guidance for medical device trials on lay summaries. And the industry's position was that we make it clearer where our GLSP is located in relation to the existing guidance. So for example, from Transcelerate and MCRT and MRCT, sorry. Also the format was challenged. Should it be more an overall big handbook with everything in it, or a more just principle presenting document? There was also concern that our proposal did not provide enough flexibilities in the content and in the process, especially when during the trial there are changes that had not been foreseen in the planning process. But of course, that is clearly within what we want to do, but we need to obviously express that more clearly. A big discussion is the presentation of the safety results, because that is a lot of information and difficult to communicate. And also the question whether there should be a single master lay summary for a global study and then local translations, etc. All that has to be, again, taken into consideration. And the feasibility of the proposed patient engagement level to be enabled under the huge time constraints was also questioned by industry. So what are the next steps? We are consolidating now all these comments at the moment as we speak. We had another meeting with CTEG on the 7th of October. We will have another one with them on the 20th of November. We will hopefully finalize the document by end of the year and then release and disseminate our GLSP recommendations end of the year, beginning of next year, and hope that this will be a very helpful and very broadly used document that ensures that the patients and public at large will ultimately know much more about clinical trials. There is much more interest now because of COVID in clinical research, so we should benefit from that interest. And therefore, the release of these guidelines and the promotion of lay summary and patient engagement in lay summaries is very timely. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. And so I think we can open the floor for questions. Any immediate questions to our presenters? I
don't see many questions at the moment.
No.
So what we would like to do is, of course, have a discussion with you about that, because as you have heard, the document is not finished. There is still room and possibilities to provide input to help us come up with decisions between these different opinions. And to stimulate a bit the discussion, we have prepared 4 questions that we would like to ask in a poll to give you a better idea, perhaps, where you personally stand in some of the key issues that we are still struggling with. So can we launch the poll?
Yes, we can, and I'm on it. So our dear participants, I hope you can see the questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So please feel free to submit your answers.
So you need to a bit explain it. So you read the question and then you hit on the line or on the yes or the first option or the second or the third option, and then it starts counting, or how does it work?
Yes, that's exactly how it works. So you need to just choose the answer you wish, and then we will see the results.
Okay, so the first question is, do you think that the GLSP recommendations will enable patient engagement in the lay summary process in a reliable way? So is this document, is this approach to have such a definition of good lay summary practice a reasonable and promising tool to achieve reliable patient engagement in that process? So yes, from planning and production to dissemination, or only in the dissemination process, or no? So please give us your opinion. Just hit on the answer you would like to give.
Perfect. I can see answers coming in now, Ingrid.
Very good.
So still many people that need to participate. I can see 12, 13 responses so far. So everyone, let us know your opinion.
So we have over 80 people in the call. So so we should still have a lot more. So please,
exactly,
use your mouse and tick the answer you want to give. Still more? Yes, there are still more coming.
Yeah, I see there is a very strong yes for the GLSP recommendations enabling patient engagement in the lay summary processes.
Okay, we are
planning and production to dissemination.
But it's, yeah, it's there, at least those who have answered, 81% of those think that this is going to help.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so there are still more coming in. Good. I think we can go to the next question, and this is, should sponsors, so commercial and non-commercials, be encouraged to proactively send lay summaries to patient organizations representing the investigated disease area? So should sponsors identify patient organizations in their country, in different countries, who are working in that area of indication, and proactively send lay summaries from their trial to these patient organizations, leaving it to the patient organizations to disseminate that to their community? Of course, no patient organization is obliged to, but at least offering patient organizations to disseminate then this or not. There are people who say that is already commercial. That is not what especially pharma companies should do, but if we allow it, if we promote it to sponsors, then we should do it to all type of sponsors. So is that something we should do, or should we better say no? So we should, one answer is yes to patient organizations in the countries where the trial took place. Another option is to say yes to patient organizations all over in Europe and beyond. And the third one is no dissemination through the European CTIS system alone is sufficient. That should be done. This is the right way of doing it. So please make up your mind here. How should we disseminate? What should we recommend? How to disseminate lay summaries in Europe?
Ingrid, I think your explanations of the questions are really helpful, and the participants can already see all questions, so feel free to participate. In the meantime, I just wanted to bring in a question from the chat, Ingrid, if you don't mind, and we also give people some time to respond. So Fiona Olivier is asking us, she'd be interested to learn more about best practices in implementation, if we have any.
Well, at the moment we have not much more than the guidelines that we are, or these recommendations that we are going to present, and we have a lot of, so there's a core document which is consisting of an executive summary and then the 4 phases, and then there are a number of attachments or annexes that give much more detailed information. For example, the dissemination, the benefits and risks of all the different approaches is there lined out in much more detail. Or also on the planning process, on pediatric studies, there are very practical experiences as far as we have it presented in these annexes to the GLSP document. But at the moment, there is no training. At the moment, there is no formal way of presenting or teaching how to implement in practical terms the GLSP. But we are fully aware that this is something that will have to be taken up once this has been released, and also hopefully in preparation for the start of the clinical trial regulation. So in 2021, that organizations are really able to prepare themselves practically and concretely for preparation of the first lay summaries once they have finished their first studies according to that regulation.
Yeah, also there is several people is mentioning that they don't see the poll results, because I can see it in the screen. So 2 people, Richard and Nan, don't you have access to the screen?
So we can circulate the poll results after the session as well, but I'm also happy to actually pull up the screen just now and share my screen with you with the poll results, so that we can show it to all participants. And of
but
course,
I'm not sure that
everybody
everybody has already voted on all questions. So let me quickly go through question number 3 and 4, so that you can make now your comments to number 3. And then we show all the results, I think, afterwards. So question number 3 is, should the results...
Okay, yeah, sure. That's fine with me.
Okay, so should the results from secondary objectives be presented in the lay summary? As I mentioned, this is a very hot topic, and we would like to know what you think. So should all the secondary objectives and their results be presented in the lay summary? Yes, all, or yes, but only those that are of relevance to patients, or yes, but only those the sponsor considers as most relevant from a scientific point of view, or no, only results from primary objectives should be presented to keep the document shorter and more focused. These are the different type of considerations. So if you could make up your mind here and click on the answer that you would like to give here. Are there still people who would like to give their opinion here on that question? I don't think that there is much movement here anymore. So then let's go to the 4th question. Which level of detail should GLSP recommend for user testing and translation, taking into consideration the time and budget constraints? Keep in mind, all that has to be done within 12 months, or in pediatric studies within 6 months. That means that's a huge effort, and you need to have a really well organized and prepared organization to achieve that. So one answer is the lowest possible effort, meaning user testing by a layperson, by just one person, whoever that layperson is, no translations. Just make the minimal effort just to have it and to have it in time. The next possible answer is as much as affordable, budget and time-wise, but at least user testing by one layperson that is not involved in the trial so far, and translation into all languages in which the informed consent was translated. Or another option is, as much as possible, user testing by several laypersons not involved in the trial, translation into all languages, several people involved in, and also in several languages in which the informed consent was offered, and user testing of all translations. So you really requiring in our lay summary, in our GLSP here, to do a maximum in that aspect as the thing that we should require, as that is where we want to be. So please give us your ideas here as well. There is no more activity here. So I think we can really show the results now. So if you want to do that,
yes.
to make sure that everything...
I'm happy to just share my screen and show the results we've got. So I hope I can do that. Just give me one moment. Okay. I don't know if, can you see my screen now? Yeah?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I can't really make the poll bigger as is, but as you can see, so the first question it has been answered. So 78% of the people think that GLSP recommendations will enable patient engagement in the lay summary process. And I'm showing the second question. I don't know if you want to comment, Ingrid.
Okay, so the sponsor should be encouraged to proactively say, send lay summaries to patient organizations. We have here a split picture. The majority, half of you said, who answered said that yes, that the sponsor should do that to patient organizations in all EU countries and beyond, to really have here a global responsibility to give access, fair access to patients all over the world to receive that information. 11% said, no, 30% that said yes, but only to patient organizations in the countries where the study took place. And 19% said no, that has too many complications, obviously, for many aspects. So dissemination through the CTIS is the standard, should be the standard, and everything else should not be recommended.
Sorry,
So,
Ingrid, people in the chat are saying that they don't see the poll. They see the presentation, Sophia, the cover presentation for the patient.
So they can still not see. We can see it.
Okay.
We see it as organizer.
I'm sharing my full screen, so I thought that should cut it. I am so sorry about that. So one second. So yes, I'm just looking for publish the results. 1 second. I think I will need to end the poll in order to publish the results though.
Okay.
So is everybody okay? Okay, I'm sharing the results. I'm sorry, I just didn't want to end the poll and I thought I can do both, but apparently I can't. So I'm sharing the results now. Could you just feedback to us if you see the results as we speak?
It seems to be visible now. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Apologies. Okay. I thought I'm...
Prima. Thank you so much. It's always good to have somebody with us who is technically well equipped. Very good. Thank you very much. So so answer to number one, yes, 78% of the responders said yes, patients, the GLSP will help to improve and enable patient engagement in that process. That's very reassuring, and I'm very happy to hear that. Answers to the question number one, the proactively sending the lay summaries to patient organizations. You see the picture here that about half of the respondents said yes, it should go as broadly as possibly, proactively all over the world practically, as far as ever possible. 1/3 said yes, but only to patient organizations in the countries where the study took place, and others said no, just the CTIS. The third question, should the results from secondary objectives be presented in the lay summary? There, 57% of the respondents said yes, but only those that are relevant to patients. 32% said yes, all. And only 3% said yes, but only those that the sponsor considers relevant. So the sponsor's opinion is not valued here, and only primary objectives is only selected by 8%. That is really interesting, because in our discussions, where we have, of course, a lot of people from medical writing and medical writing departments, they were very strongly voting for only presenting primary objectives to make the key message from that trial crystal clear. But in our discussions and also with others, the question of secondary objectives was raised, because secondary objectives may be really relevant for patients as well, as a hint what type of further research questions could be developed, should be developed, where is hope of this drug or possibilities of that drug to act in a way that can be further evaluated, and in this way still make the drug more relevant or more achievable for patients altogether. So this secondary objective point is a very important one. It comes with a cost of making the document, the lay summary, longer and more complex. And question number 4, which level of detail should the GLSP recommend for user testing and translations? And there you see that about a good half of the respondents said as much as affordable, but at least user testing by one layperson not involved in the trial so far, and translation into all languages in which the informed consent was translated. But we have 46% who said as much as possible, and nobody said lowest possible effort. So that gives the message to us that, Sylvia, we should be more ambitious here and put the bar higher with what we propose should be achieved. Okay, so can you scroll to the results 3 and 4? Yes, I did that. You can pull your own results window. So I think that is what we have as topics that we propose here to discuss, but we would now, I think we can close the poll now here and be open here. You can raise your hands, or you can unmute yourself, and if you want to open your camera so that we can see you, that would also be very helpful. So let's try to get more insights from you and proposals from your side. So I see Richard Ballerin. You want to unmute yourself and show your camera? Prima.
Sorry, I'm having connection problems. I can hear perfectly, but the camera's sort of failing, etc. So I'll try to resolve this.
It's fine. We hear you perfectly well, Richard. Okay. Anybody else who wants to start the discussion? Matthias. We can't hear you. You are unmuted, but we cannot hear you. Still not? I see that you are talking, but we cannot hear you.
Yeah, there's a second mute button. So yeah, just want to say thank you very much. It was a great presentation and great initiative. And no, I have no detailed questions now. I mean, many questions, of course, but I'm just following, and yeah, we'll jump in later maybe. Thank you.
So is there anyone who would say, please make sure that this is involved or included, that you don't overlook that? What is in your view really, really relevant to ensure that we get patients systematically and reliably involved in that process? What will be making or breaking that? Somebody who is involved in clinical trials, who is organizing clinical trials, and planning and preparing, performing clinical trials. When would you think, and how would you think, will it work in practical terms that patients can be enrolled into that process? Is there a phase which we propose is more difficult than another one? So is it more difficult to involve patients into the planning process than in the review process, or is it easier to include patients into the review process or in the dissemination process? What would you think? Where do we have the best chances that patients get reliably involved?
Hello, Ingrid. It's
Yeah.
Tamara. How are you?
Thank you. I'm fine. I don't.
No symptoms?
I see you.
No, I don't have my camera because I'm on the road, basically.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I cannot interact very well. I just wanted to say that my personal experience is my best start to get involved is with the idea of a study and to go to investigators and present that idea. A very easy example, we have BRCA mutations, we have people that have genetic mutations. You can get breast cancer with a very high risk, but there are still some gene carriers that don't get cancer, for example, okay? So 80% risk to get it, 20% don't get it. So when we have two sisters that grew up in the same environment, why does one get breast cancer? Why does the other not get breast cancer? And so we incentivize, for example, to investigate the healthy gene carriers. And there was born an idea to create a organoid of the breast tissue in the laboratory. And now we are attacking this tissue, and we are going to understand when cancer will appear and why and under which circumstances. So this is a study where we had the idea and the investigator thought about it, and months later she called us and said, I have an idea what we can do to study that point that you asked us. Another thing is also as we have the interaction with all stakeholders, patient organizations are the only stakeholder that interacts on regular basis with all the other stakeholders. It's also important that researchers understand that it's very useful if they involve patient organizations from the very first minute on when they plan a clinical trial. In the design already is where we can start our collaboration. Besides the idea, that's the very first place. But I think we should already get involved in the design of the trial. And if you have a patient organization in your steering committee of this trial, you will always have the guarantee of transparency, which helps a lot the whole process also, and the communication of the trial and the results. So that was just a note. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So your recommendation would be really to have the patients in the whole process and also in parallel to the process of designing and organizing the trial to prepare then also the lay summaries, including the process on how patients are going to be involved in that in practical terms. I think that is exactly what we try to achieve, that we get this mind change, that people understand that designing and preparing a clinical trial will in future also mean preparing the final study report and the lay summary, because there is this very short timeline at the end. So we have to do the planning and preparation all through, and to not run out of time, we should foresee the patient involvement in that process from the very beginning.
That is exactly what I was.
Yeah, I
thinking.
think that is really very important. Sylvia, you wanted to comment on the secondary objective question.
Yeah. Yes, because I mean, we have a never-end discussion on the secondary endpoint. So for the moment, as you presented, so primary objectives are included as being part of the Lay summaries. And from the poll results, I mean, I see that the 57% of people reply on the question. So should the results from secondary objective be presented in the Lay summaries? Yes, but only those that are relevant to the patients. And I think this is very in line with the discussions that we have had in the core group for the initiative. But this is very difficult because as we have a multi-stakeholder initiative, I mean, we have our protocol, we have the patient organizations, and we rely on this protocol. So can I ask you, I mean, for the ones that you have replied to the poll on this 57%, so for you, of course, it's maybe difficult without having the protocol and what the secondary endpoints are there, but could you give us insights or a hint on what you think as a whole, what should be important? For example, if we take an oncology protocol as a secondary endpoint to be considered.
So practical examples, what are patient relevant secondary outcomes? How to get this in hand, how to define that, no?
Yes. I know it's a complicated question. We have had a never-ending discussion on that. So, but for the brave ones here, if you want to comment.
Just examples, it would be helpful. It's always easier to discuss when we have concrete examples. So if you could give us examples, what you would think are patient relevant, potentially secondary outcomes. So, I mean, typical secondary outcomes are in the area of other parameters that are measured, safety parameters, patient-reported outcomes, these other ways of evaluations. These are typically secondary outcomes. I see here an answer in the chat box, patient-reported outcomes, quality of life. Okay, anything, so this would be, so really focus on the patient-reported outcomes, and particularly quality of life would be then important aspects.
Okay, thank you. I take note of that.
Safety outcomes come from Richard. Okay, I mean, that groups around the not primarily purely scientific parameters, but more the aspects that are around information directly coming from the patient, the quality of life, the side effects. So that we really make sure that it's not only the primary outcome, but also these type of, and that's perhaps really a good way of combining it, the quality of life, patient-reported outcomes, safety outcomes, that we bundle that as typical examples of patient-relevant results, and recommend that that should be as well presented. That. And Christian Andriusic says secondary outcomes should be discussed with the participants in the clinical trial and or eventually with patient experts or associations. Yes, that's absolutely correct. That is a very important discussion that has to take place during the planning even of the study and preparation of the lay summary process, to make sure that there is an agreement, a multi-stakeholder agreement from the scientists and methodologists, but also from the patients involved. Yeah. Another topic is possibility to have access to other therapies after the trial. Yeah, that is something that we also have as a request in the GLSP, that there is a comment on that in the lay summary, because that is, in fact, in many studies, a very important aspect. There is also in the existing CTEC recommendations a description that there should be also given an understanding of the results in the context of the existing treatments or the treatment options that are there. And there it fits really well that, that there is a discussion or presentation on possible follow-on treatment, next treatment options beyond the trial, and also what relevance this study has for potential decisions, future decisions on treatment options. Yeah, very good points.
Ingrid?
Yeah,
I just had a question.
Yeah.
Is it not possible to also include in the informed consent form a question, kind of a survey for the patient, saying what they want to have included in their lay summary, and then we put some options, what they can cross, and if they have additional comments to put it as well, so that for future studies we might know what is in, like, other than that, what we have now discussed, what can be included, so that we have their voice as well. So not only the ones who are in our steering committees or in the patient organizations, but for each of the studies, particularly because there are so many specific ones, that they have their voice also in putting that in the informed consent or in the kind of questionnaires that we put there, only like as a brief question saying that this will help the clinical team and the teams in the future to know what exactly is needed.
That is a very good idea. I must admit, nobody has brought that up so far. So I think this is really, really an excellent idea that we should take into consideration as an option to include the patient, the participating patient, already in that part of the process as well. I think this is a brilliant idea. I will definitely bring it up. We have a next phone call tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ingrid. Merci.
Diane, I think you wanted to say something? No?
Oh, no.
No? So I think we are also coming to the end of our time slot. I'm very sorry about that, but I think we have to wrap up. So Sophia, would you like to wrap up here?
Yes, thank you, Ingrid. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Sorry, for a second I thought I was muted. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has joined this session today at the Patient Engagement Open Forum. I'd like to communicate the very positive comments about your presentations, Ingrid and Sylvia. Many people thanking you for the great insights and great presentations. I'd also like to just flag that the Patient Engagement Open Forum is ongoing, and we are going to have a session, an upcoming session on the 5th of November, and then the closing session is on the 23rd of November. So please keep an eye on the agenda and join us. The other thing I wanted to mention to all of you is that this session has been recorded and is going to be available on the Patient Engagement Open Forum website, along with the two presentations that you have seen. So I'd like to thank everyone again for your participation today. Thank you to our speakers, and I'm wishing you a really nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sophia.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Ingrid. Bye.
Bye.